What's going on, Lion fans? Welcome to the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Meko, and today I'm joined by another special guest. Ryan Matthews is here to join us today to have a really special conversation. First and foremost, though, Ryan, how have you been? I feel like it's been forever since the people have seen you, and I feel like even more people are going to click on this video once they realize that you're a part of it.
Yeah, I feel well. Thank you. It's nice to be here, but I do feel like I'm emerging from a cave. I feel like it's my first time seeing the light in a while, and I'm glad it's with you, Miko, because man, we did this so long ago, and we haven't done it in such a long time. So I'm glad to be doing this with you.
Yeah, man. No, same here. My goal was always like to get more people from the staff to be on the YouTube channel. So like again, obviously me and Morgan have been like partnering up all season. Jeremy's been jumping on here and there. We were lucky enough to get Eric when he was, at his least busy. So I'm glad that like again, you're starting to transition into your least busiest time of the year because of your profession. I'm sure a lot of people are jealous. I am especially jealous that you actually get a summer vacation, but it's cool that it actually opens up for you to have a little more free time.
Yeah, I hope I get a chance to have some more chats with you coming up here pretty soon. And I'm glad SB Nation kind of forced our hand. So way to go.
Yeah, not saying that with heavy sarcasm at all.
I don't know, something like that.
But when I reached out to you to kind of join me on the YouTube channel, like you had a really cool topic that you wanted to address, and you actually wrote a great piece over for the Pride of Detroit Direct newsletter that obviously not everybody's going to get a chance to see, because obviously you do have to be subscribed, and if you aren't subscribed to that, it's worth subscribing to, because there is some very unique content that everybody else doesn't get to see. But you had a really interesting take on a player on the Lions that actually gets overlooked quite often, and that player being David Montgomery, the running back that the Lions signed last year. When you look at this offense, and specifically looking at David Montgomery, what is it about him that you think that just causes people to kind of overlook what he brings to this football team?
It's an interesting question, Miko. I think people were really excited when David Montgomery signed on board, because in the moment, it felt like the Lions were upgrading. It felt like they were taking this rushing attack, this offense, in a little bit of a new direction, because, well, from there, it's okay, they're not going to re-sign Jamal Williams. And then after that, it's they draft Jahmyr Gibbs and they move on from DeAndre Swift. And I think in the here and now, Jahmyr Gibbs had the rookie season that everybody was hoping for him to have, starting with the second half of the NFL season, right? There were so many people clamoring for more Jahmyr Gibbs, more touches, more targets. They wanted Jahmyr Gibbs to be a focal point of this offense. I think a lot of us Lions fans, we understood that that wasn't going to happen right out of the gate. And that's what David Montgomery was there for. And David Montgomery really bridged the gap for Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of his NFL, onsetting, right? Like he was the one who bridged the gap and got Jahmyr Gibbs to where he was able to be a contributing factor to this offense in a big way, and so many flashy plays. And I love Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that should be stated, right? We love Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is incredible. He's awesome. He should be a huge part of the offense. It's just that David Montgomery needs to be a part of that offense too.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost, when it comes to David Montgomery, it's very similar to the Taylor Decker effect, where Taylor Decker has been like this staple of the Lions offense for so many years. He's so good, sometimes gets overlooked, and primarily the last couple of years, he's been kind of overshadowed by the other tackle that's plays on the other side of the line of him, because Penei Sewell is younger and he's this athletic freak, and like there's all of these great things to say about Penei, but that doesn't necessarily take away from Taylor Decker. I feel like the same thing is kind of true when it comes to David Montgomery. Ja is amazing. He's electric at the running back position, but David Montgomery in his own right is just as dynamic and just as explosive. I mean, when you look at it, he had the longest run for this Lions team last year with that 75-yard touchdown run he had against the Chargers. So like, it's not like he's just, to kind of go back to what you were saying, he's not just Jamal Williams in that, like, oh, he's this hammer that's just picking up 3-4 yards here and there. Like, David Montgomery was picking up big yardage, picking up first downs, and was being a really heavy contributor to this football team.
Oh yeah, like without a doubt. And something that really stood out to me about David Montgomery was, and this is way back. You got to think all the way back to the beginning of the 2023 season, and that game. It was Thursday Night Football. It was in Lambeau. Now, funny you bring up Taylor Decker, but he was also questionable to play in that game. Taylor Decker and David Montgomery, they end up both playing. It was the quintessential Dan Campbell game. I think
Yes.
if I can ever think about a football performance and what Dan Campbell would want his team to look like offensively from start to finish, it would be that game at Lambeau, because David Montgomery was relentless. David
Mhm.
Montgomery would not go down for anybody. It was 4 yards in a cloud of dust. I think the guy had 32 carries that night.
Yeah.
It was just the epitome of, we are going to outlast you, and you are not going to want to play football. Like, you're not good. And you could see it by the end of the game too, Meko. Like, there's that really long drive at the beginning of the fourth quarter. It was like, it was almost, I think it was almost 10 minutes long, where
Mhm.
the Lions just put the Packers to bed because it was turn and hand the ball to David Montgomery. And it didn't look like the Packers wanted to tackle anymore.
No.
And 32 carries for 121 yards and 3 touchdowns. And it's not even so much the touchdowns, it's just the way that the Lions imposed their will on the Packers. And
Yeah.
they had no answer for it because they just didn't have the grit. And that's become a bit of a cliche and a catchphrase and kind of a buzzword for this organization, Meko. But it truly it fits the description of what the Lions were able to accomplish that game. And a lot of it had to do with David Montgomery.
I'm glad you brought that game up, because I remember watching that game and almost kind of feeling like, oh, I don't think Ja's ever going to get like more than 10 carries if this is how David Montgomery is going to run every single game. And obviously that's not how things kind of turned out, but it does. It kind of showcases why the Lions, prioritize him as a free agent target. And it goes back to what you're saying on why he needs to be such a big focal point of this football team, because I feel like it's not like too much hyperbole to say, like, if David Montgomery doesn't have the performance that he has last year, that job probably never pops off the way he does, because he has a running mate with him that takes off so much pressure from him. And again, when opposing defenses think that they're getting a break because Ja's coming in, it's like, no, you just have to deal with a different animal altogether, because David Montgomery is that guy that's going to punish you and not go down on first contact. That was one of the things that we hyped up about him when he got here. But it's also the fact that, again, he's still a threat in the receiving game. He's still that guy that, if you get on the goal line, he's got a nose for the end zone. Finished the season with 13 touchdowns. There's so much about this guy that, it's kind of ridiculous, and it's kind of odd that we've even allowed him to kind of go under the radar. Like I said, when you brought the topic up to me, I even had to self-reflect and be like, wow, I've been so focused on Jahmyr Gibbs that I have kind of forgotten that David Montgomery is a part of this football team.
And there's nothing wrong with that, Meko. It's totally fine, right? Like, I think everybody gets wrapped up in Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown and what kind of wrinkle is JMO going to open up for this offense? Laporta, I mean, he was incredible as a rookie. What's it going to look like in year 2? It's
Mm-hmm.
totally fair and with well-reasoned, arguments to say that any of those guys should be the focal point of the offense on any given day for the Lions. There's just got to be room for David Montgomery too, because I think the thing, again, Meko, to just punctuate it with an exclamation point, is the Lions are their most dominant on offense when they can do that to a team like they did to the Packers. And the other game that I think about is the NFC Championship game in the first half. The reason that game felt so one-sided, the reason that it felt like the Lions were in complete control of that game. I mean, yeah, JMO has the great, incredible play to open up the scoring, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that first half is David Montgomery. He had 15 carries for 93 yards. I mean, 6.3 yards per carry was his most effective and his most efficient as far as a Detroit Lion. But he had 9 first downs gained in that game, and he had 15 carries. And it's just, I mean, 11 of Montgomery's 17 touches were in the first half. 14 of his 17 came before Josh Reynolds dropped that fourth down conversion midway through the third quarter. And that's when it felt like the wheels started to fall off.
Yeah.
But the Lions were in complete control, right, of that entire game. Like, you felt like they're going to do it. They're going to go to the Super Bowl. And a big part of that would have been because David Montgomery is an absolute battering ram.
And it's funny because, like, when preparing to like do this video with you today, like, I kept thinking, like, okay, we all know that when it comes down to like the Lions offensive line, like, that's the engine that helps this offense run. But it almost kind of feels like what we're talking about now, it's like David Montgomery, and again, as well as Jahmyr Gibbs, but focusing on David Montgomery, that's the key that kind of turns the engine, that kind of gets everything kind of going and going in the right direction, is when you have David Montgomery being that type of running back, able to pick up first downs and able to constantly keep the chains moving and being a dual threat at the same time. Everything else with this offense kind of feels like it just falls into place, like you were saying earlier. Amon-Ra is a weapon unto himself. He seems to be the most uncoverable wide receiver in the NFL right now. Sam Laporta coming off that impressive rookie, season, and the same with Jahmyr Gibbs. But again, it almost sometimes feels like if David Montgomery is the one that starts getting things going, everything else can kind of just like fall into its necessary place.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And to stack from your car analogy, another analogy on top, it's very much like a starting pitcher using their fastball, and once they can locate that fastball, then they can go to their changeup stuff. Then they can go to Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Like if a pitcher is able to establish the strike zone early, that's David Montgomery, right? Like it's repeated. You have to respect it, and then as soon as you respect it, boom, it's a change of pace. Jahmyr Gibbs, who's 50 yards to the end zone, touchdown. It really does set up everything for the Lions offense. I totally agree. It's a great point.
So when looking at this team, and again, everything is about ascending. Everything is about, especially for this team right now, getting back to the NFC Championship game and ideally getting to the Super Bowl. Do you think that anything needs to change with the dynamic? Because like you pointed out, and I agree with you as well, there's a lot of hype around Jahmyr Gibbs, and the clamor for him to get more touches is probably going to be even louder than it was last year, because now we know what it looks like when the ball is in his hands. But do you see anything kind of changing between how the Lions just decide to, split carries or just employ them into the offense?
Yeah, that's a really good question to bring up, because the thing that stands out to me about the start to David Montgomery's career as a Detroit Lion was that it was just heavy usage. It was almost too much usage, right? Because we get that game against the Packers that we talked about. He had 32 carries in that game. In the first few games, 21 carries against Kansas City, 16 carries against Seattle, but he also had a ton of targets in the Carolina game, which, again, you think about another dominant performance. The Carolina game that was 42-24, it was 19 carries for 109 yards. Right. So there's this common theme of when the Lions are very dominant, it's behind that incredible offensive line, which we haven't really talked about at all, but the offensive line definitely helps. But then you get a battering ram like Montgomery running behind them, then it becomes dominant. I think what they're going to do is they're going to try to steady the usage and not have the offense be so dependent on Montgomery after he gets it started, to your point, right? Like he can kind of set it up, or even in some weeks, hey, it makes more sense to have a little bit more Jahmyr Gibbs in the game plan. They can go that route. I think what's going to be critical is them managing Montgomery's workload to keep him where he needs to be to still be that tone setter for the offense late into the season.
Yeah.
Manage their workload until you get to the playoffs. I think that's going to now be Lions fans, as you're watching football games. You need to keep that in mind, as the Lions are thinking about the long game here. And last year was a new experience for a lot of people. And to see Sam Laporta, playing in a quote unquote meaningless game and getting injured and things of that nature. I think Lions fans now, as you watch it, it's all about what's going to happen in January. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse, Meko. I know we don't want to get too ahead of our skis in terms of the playoffs are a guaranteed thing, but there's going to be something to the way that they lessen the workload and keep it more balanced with players to keep their long-term health in mind.
Yeah, and I think we're even kind of seeing that now, even in like some of the off-season workouts, right? Like they're not really employing a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs at this point, like allowing him to really kind of almost like as if he's like this 3 or 4 year vet, like letting him take his time and not be included into every single practice. But again, that's all, I agree with you. That's all for the long haul of like, hey, what will this team look like in December, in January? Because I think that's their aspirations. Obviously, we have to see, they have to play the game so that becomes the reality, but that at least is the expectation and the aspirations of the team at this point.
Oh, yeah. And that goes for the players that this coaching staff trusts, right? Like, they're probably going to see a lot of Ennis Rakestraw in the preseason. you're going to see a lot of the young players play a lot, just like Jack Campbell did last preseason, right? Played all the way through. Snaps on snaps on snaps. Like, that's going to happen until the coaching staff feels comfortable. They probably just feel that way with Jahmyr Gibbs because the second half of last season happened.
So what you're saying is we're going to see a lot of Sione Baki, which I'm actually not mad about at all.
Who's upset about that, right? Like, that's preferred preseason football.
At this point, absolutely. Well, no, man, I appreciate you coming on and doing this topic because I agree with you. I think David Montgomery is that weapon that is kind of being a little, forgotten, and it's a dangerous weapon. It's almost like it's really kind of crazy that this is the weapon that a lot of people aren't focusing on because yes, you have one of the higher paid wide receivers. You have this young wide receiver that looks to finally be starting to ascend to where everyone thought he would be. You have a top 3 tight end. You have a young running back that I feel like in a couple of years could be considered like top 3 running backs in the NFL at this point.
If he's not already.
Right. But right next to him, you have another just like unsung hero that's just like, he kind of keeps everything going though. So really appreciate you coming on and kind of pointing that out to myself as well as the audience here.
Oh yeah. Hey, I'll come back and chat anytime you'd like, Meko.
Well, listen, I hope you guys enjoyed seeing Ryan today. I definitely enjoyed having him on the YouTube channel. If you're looking for any more Detroit Lions content, you can always check out prideofdetroit.com. They are always uploading brand new articles over there, literally every single day. And with the mini camp kicking off today, I'm sure there's going to be some mini camp observations. So you definitely want to be able to check those out. And if you want to stay tuned into what we have going on over here at the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Both of those things will keep you notified, but it also helps out our channel immensely as we continue to try to bring in more viewers each and every day. So with all that said, I'm Meko, he's Ryan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.